what are like the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you're looking at when evaluating demand last minute?
For me, it's nights booked versus nights available. I think length of stay searches, if you can get any sort of data on that, those are going to be important to position your portfolio to align. Sometimes even just going on Airbnb and doing a search for several different length of stays to understand the supply on those searches is going to determine how you need to pivot your specific segment of portfolio to align.
And I would say the competitor calendar also kind of shows you the minimum length of stay. So just like Omar was saying,
Mhm.
a lot of times I might suggest, a rather than decreasing your price for last minute stays, maybe try first increasing the length of stay and see if you can still make the same amount of money, but instead of 1 2 night booking, you just get 2 1 night bookings at the same price.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll wait a couple minutes for everybody who registered to join. In the meantime, as we're waiting here, if y'all want to use the chat and let us know where you're from, maybe where you're at in your revenue management journey, how many listings you manage, anything else that you want to share with us. Oh, we've got one already. Ooh, Rome, Italy. Very cool. Thanks for staying up. I think it's later, probably the end of your day. My name's Becca. We'll sort of get into introductions, but I'm based out of Charleston, South Carolina. I actually used to be a property manager here in the Folly Beach and Isle of Palms markets before I joined the PriceLabs team. Hey, Cody, Charleston. Love it. Small world. Philippines, Germany. We really have people from all over. This is so exciting. And yes, if y'all if somebody asked this, the recording will be shared after the webinar. It'll also be posted to our YouTube channel. This is also a podcast. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to RevLabs. This will be posted on Spotify, Apple Music, kind of wherever you can reach podcasts. Very cool. Very cool. But today we have a really exciting topic. We'll be talking about the art of last minute pricing. And I've got some great guests. I'm sorry, I'm just sort of moving around some Zoom stuff on my screen. Okay, we're 2 minutes past, so let's get started. If anybody else joins, they can catch up with us. But awesome. So hello, everybody. My name is Becca. I lead the US Solutions team here at PriceLabs. I'm also one of the hosts of our RevLabs podcast. Today, we are doing our March Masterclass, and I've got some really great guests that are going to be giving us some expert insights on the art of last minute pricing. So sometimes it can be really difficult to understand, when do I start to drop my prices? Do I hold rate if it's my high season? At what point is last minute? What do I do? So we'll be exploring all of these different topics today. But first, just a little bit about us. So we actually already introduced myself, but please use the chat. If you have any comments that you want to share with us, the chat is a really great place to do that. Also, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see an option for Q&A. If you have questions and you want them to be answered, please use the Q&A. If you use the chat, it's really hard for us to sort of keep up with it if there's a lot of different people sort of speaking at once. So I've got my colleague and friend Aditya here with us. He'll be answering some of the questions in Q&A, but of course, if you have questions directly for our guests to discuss, we will be answering those probably throughout the webinar, as well as at the end. Sorry. So a little bit about PriceLabs. So PriceLabs was founded in 2014. If you don't already know us, we've been around for about 10 years now. We currently help price over 480,000 listings worldwide every single day. We are a revenue management solution for short-term rentals, vacation rentals, midterm rentals, service apartments, hotels, you name it. Our system is very customizable. So depending on what your goals are, we can help you achieve those. We are operating in over 100 countries. We offer our services in 6 different languages, and our team is worldwide. So enough about us. I will take 2 seconds to talk a little bit about the RevLabs podcast. So if you all, hopefully you're joining today because you do already follow our podcast. But one of our goals as a company is to bring revenue management education to the space. So through our podcast, we do these monthly master classes. We also do market deep dives. We talk about some of our product updates and other goings on in the industry. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do. Again, you can listen if you want to use either Spotify or Apple Music, or really anywhere that you are listening to podcasts today. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel because all of our recordings are posted there as well. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our lovely speakers. First, we have Matt, who's the owner of Pricing Pro. Matt, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Matt Nielson. I own Pricing Pro. We do revenue management mostly for property managers who have anywhere between 3 to 50 listings. I also started out kind of like Becca as a property manager, but learned that, numbers was really my thing, not so much talking with guests all the time. So I pivoted to revenue management, and yeah, that's me.
Very cool. And then we have Omar, who's the director of revenue management at Purple Pricing.
Hey everyone. So my name is Omar. So I've been in the revenue management industry for about 6 years now. Started my career with Evolve Vacation Rentals, actually on the owner support side of things. So got to know a lot of our owners during that time. And like Matt, was good with numbers, studied economics in university. So really wanted to pivot in that direction and started working on the revenue management department. I worked briefly with a company called Lighthouse. So a commercial platform providing revenue growth tools to both mostly hotels at the time, but I think now they've tapped into short-term rentals as well. And then I joined Avant Stay, which is a little bit of a luxury vacation platform. And then most recently, I was at a private equity firm, managing their portfolio there. And now currently at my new role, Director of Revenue Management, fresh as of the last month. So there we're helping property managers and hosts, just providing revenue maximizing strategies for their portfolios.
Perfect. Before we move on, I'd love to sort of dive into some of the markets that you all have experience with as revenue managers. I know as revenue management consultants, you're working with clients from typically very diverse markets. When you were property managers or when you were at, some of your other roles, what were some of the markets that were sort of impactful in you learning how to do revenue management, learning about, different seasonal changes versus, maybe you're in a city and it's not super seasonal. Talk to us a little bit about the markets that you all have worked in the past.
Yeah, so my first market that I started in was in St. George, Utah. So southern Utah, where it's like 1,000,000 degrees in the summer and it's close to Zion's. So that's kind of where I learned about seasonality, because it's really good pretty much all year except for July and August when it's 120 degrees. But other than that, I just love the southern Utah market because I'm from northern Utah where it snows. So there you have peak season is winter when it's skiing for a couple months, and then the rest of the year is just really slow. So you got to hurry and make all your money in those months, and it can be kind of stressful. Whereas St. George, Utah, it's kind of more level and it's pretty high all year except for those couple of months. So it's kind of the opposite as northern Utah. I also operate in a lot of different states in the United States. I won't name all of them, it would take too long, but New Jersey is a big one, and Pennsylvania, I've got a few, and New York. So I guess kind of all over the place.
Very good. How about you, Omar?
Yeah, so when I had started with Evolve and then around Avant Stay as well, I mostly managed the southwest part of the United States. So Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. So a lot of hot states. I grew up in Texas actually, so I was very familiar with the seasonality there. But cities like Austin, Houston, Dallas are going to be much different than some of your urban towns. And then even New Mexico, Taos, you have some ski markings there. Arizona, Phoenix, Scottsdale, huge short-term rental market. California mostly did like Big Bear, Lake Arrowhead, some of those places. And then when I was working for the private equity firm, they mostly operated in ski resorts. So across US and Canada, Park City, Aspen, we had some in Yellowstone, Canmore, Mont Tremblant, Quebec, Whistler. So a little bit of a swing from my previous experience, but it was good to know how to operate in those markets because it really carries you through the rest of the year a lot of the times. And then now at my current company, yeah, doing consulting all over the place, Charleston, Florida, Yellowstone, even some abroad as well. So a lot of fun markets and a lot of different seasonalities.
Very cool, very cool. Well, definitely a diverse mix here, which is awesome. It's what I wanted to hear. So let's dive into sort of the agenda for today. So we're really just focusing on last minute pricing. So how we're going to get bookings without sacrificing revenue. The worst thing that, when we're doing revenue management reviews, if we see that maybe your prices were too high far out and then you're having to drop prices really, really significantly close in, really can, affect your bottom line there. So today we'd like to talk about that art of getting the price right and getting the timing right as well. So let's kick it off. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can just kind of chat. Talk to me about when you're entering a market. Maybe it's a new market that you haven't seen before. This is a new client that you have, or even maybe one that you've operated in for a while, but trends are always changing. How are you actually evaluating what last minute means, and how does that maybe change throughout the year?
Yeah, it's a great question because last minute can be defined differently depending on your market, depending on, how big the listing is, depending on what time of year it is. So the biggest thing that I always do to figure that out is if you go into PriceLabs in the neighborhood data tab, that's going to show you pretty much everything you need to know. My favorite way to figure out the definition for last minute is if you go to the competitor calendar, you can hand pick your closest competitors. You want to pick people that have the same size listing, same bedroom count, same amenities, same review score, same listing quality, all that. You want to find some that are super similar to you. And then look on that calendar and see when they're getting bookings, when they're not. Or do they have a short lead booking window, or do they have a long one? And if you look at that, then that's going to tell you when you should be getting booked as long as you picked your competitors wisely.
Yeah, I love the neighborhood data tab on PriceLabs. I think that's a great landing spot for when you're trying to understand the dynamics of a new market. I rely on the occupancy tab a little bit more, so understanding how things have changed year over year. Seeing the pickup is great. Seeing the 7-day markup that you see on that chart, understanding where bookings are rolling in, and then seeing your occupancy during those time periods to make sure that you're aligned. If you have a portfolio that you have historical data on, that's going to be huge. So understanding what the trends have been over the last few years, but also knowing that the market tends to shift quite a bit, especially since COVID. So knowing that booking windows are shrinking, getting a grasp on the booking windows for each of your markets is a good way to kind of have a launching point of when you should be expecting bookings. And then, yeah, to add on Matt's point, I think knowing when your direct competitors are also booking, that's really who you're up against. So understanding that you're also keeping pace with them is going to be huge.
No, that definitely makes sense. Matt and Omar as well, when you are picking your comps, what are some like key things that you're looking for to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, essentially?
Yeah, good question. I guess I should distinguish between the competitor calendar and PriceLabs and maybe like a market dashboard. So I'm talking about the competitor calendar, which is just your very closest competitors. I think you can pick up to 10.
And I can show that even while
Okay,
you're.
yeah,
Let me do
yeah,
that.
that'd be great. So I would say some of the most important things for me that I've found when picking your closest competitors is if you have professional pictures in your listing, you're also going to want to have competitors that have professional pictures. That is a very important pricing factor. If you don't have professional pictures, same thing, you're going to want to pick competitors that don't have professional pictures. And another big one is guest count. Guest count and bedroom count are kind of equally similar or equally important. I would say guest count is going to be where you show up in search results. So even if you have a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, if they both sleep 6 guests, you're still going to show up in the same search. So I think guest count is a big one. Amenities, location. If I think some important amenities that I found are pools. Obviously, if you have a pool, you're going to want to pick competitors that have pools. Hot tub is a big one too, or a jacuzzi. Um, and yeah, overall listing quality, if it's in the woods, you're going to want to pick something that's in the woods. If it's right on the beach, you're going to want to pick somebody that's right on the beach. If it's a block away from the beach, pick somebody that's a block away from the beach. You just want to get it as close as possible.
Yeah, I think to add to all of those points, those are things I consider as well. But usually I kind of kick off with getting a qualitative understanding of the property, whether it's a bit more of a budget property, economy, or luxury. That's kind of my launching point. And then from there, I jump into Matt's points of location, proximity to your property. Amenities is going to be a big one depending on your market. So some markets, you're really going to struggle if you don't have a hot tub. If it's a ski market, having a ski in out location is going to be huge. You're going to be able to drive much higher ADRs compared to those that don't have that proximity or location. And then I think bedroom count, sleep count, understanding that during peak season, you're going to be able to compete maybe with a bit of a higher bedroom count or somebody that has a property with similar amenities. But during the slow season or off season, you may be competing with a lower bed count just to try to struggle or try to capture some of the same occupancy that you're also competing. And that's a bit more limited during those times. So yeah, taking all those dynamics into hand. What I like about PriceLabs in this point is that you can really toggle your neighborhood data to consider a lower bedroom count, a higher bedroom count, and really place your listing among the price ranges that you're going to be really aiming for to try to capture some of that occupancy.
Yeah, no, and I don't, sorry, go on.
Sorry, Becca, I was just going to add one thing. Could you scroll back down to that competitor calendar?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Omar with a lot of that. There's a target market that you're going to want to go after too. So if you go up just a little bit to that map, you'll see that the cheaper it is, it's kind of gray or blue. If it's really expensive, it's more red or yellow. And that kind of goes back to the pattern I found. If you mess around with this in your market, one thing you might notice is that those blue listings are not going to have professional pictures or a really well done listing. And the yellow or red listings often will have professional pictures and a really good listing. Obviously, there's always going to be exceptions to that rule. You might find things that find otherwise, but as a general rule, that's just what I found.
I think that definitely makes sense. Yeah, this is a really great tool, especially, if you just have a couple listings that you want to just learn about the market. You don't have to invest in other tools. It's all right here if you're using our dynamic pricing. We did talk about market dashboards a little bit as well. So if you want to do some more sort of in-depth learning about your market, that's also a really great tool. But I'm going to stop sharing for now, and we can move on to sort of the next thing that we are going to talk about. Talk to me about minimum prices. So assuming that you're using a dynamic pricing tool, your minimum price is very important. It conveys sometimes the owner's wishes for what they want their property property to be rented for. Sometimes you have to have hard conversations with owners about what that minimum should be. When you're thinking about last minute bookings, how does your minimum price come into play there?
Yeah, I would say it's going to be huge. It gives you the flexibility to either capture some of that occupancy or miss out and leave the night open. And I think to your point, it's all about understanding the owner's goals with their property, whether they have an investment home and they just want to make money off of that, or if it's a home that they also vacation at quite a bit and are okay passing up on some of the rentals that possibly could be captured. Understanding those goals and then educating them based on those goals, to make sure that you have the flexibility to do the revenue management that you need to. And then also working with owners or managers to understand operational costs, variable costs, to understand that, hey, this is kind of my profit loss rate. So if I go below this, then I'm really not making anything. So it's not worth doing a turnover, having wear and tear on the property. But then also educating in that sense. In ski markets, for example, there's going to be months where it may be in your best interest to operate at a loss for a couple months or maybe a season, to make sure that you also don't fall off the search rankings for the upcoming peak season and the other upcoming high demand season. So it's a bit of a sacrifice in that sense. But I think it boils down to flexibility, education, and just getting on the same page on goals for that minimum price.
Yeah, I agree with everything Omar said. I like how he mentioned operational costs and variable costs. So that reminds me, I saw, maybe not have heard of him, but there's a very cool accounting talking head. His name is Kay Stice. And he's just, in my opinion, one of the best accounting minds like we've ever seen. But anyways, if you haven't heard of him, like what's going on? You don't listen to accounting stuff? Anyways, he explained something called contribution margin, which is your revenue minus your variable costs. So he explained it this way. If you're on a, or if you're about to book an airplane, or no, let's say you are at the desk, you're in charge of getting the airplane booked. It's 99% booked, but there is one seat left. What is the minimum price that you should not go below? And the answer ended up being, if you take the variable costs, which are the costs that you will incur by taking that flight, versus the fixed costs. So the fixed costs are like, I don't know what that would be for the airplane industry, like the cost of the airplane mortgage or whatever, things that you're going to have to pay whether that seat gets booked or not. So if you ignore fixed costs and only consider variable costs, the only thing that would be added to your costs if you were to book that extra seat on the plane is like the cost of the bag of peanuts and a little bit of Sprite and the extra fuel that it would take to carry you all the way to your destination, which ends up not being very much. So he said, like, you really could sell that airplane ticket for like maybe $10 and you would still make money off of it. And I think the same principle applies to vacation rentals. So assume that you've booked 29 nights out of the month, you have one more night left. You need to figure out what are your variable costs, and you want to make sure that your nightly rate and your cleaning fee and all that does not go below your variable cost. Now, I'm not saying that your minimum should be the variable costs or plus $1 or something. I'm not saying that's what it should be. I'm just saying be careful you don't go below that, if you know what I mean. So some variable costs that you might have for your vacation rental or a cleaning fee, extra power bill. People are going to use the AC. If you have a welcome kit with gifts and goodies for the guests or whatever, then you just want to add all of those up and ignore your mortgage, ignore the HOA fees or whatever. Don't divide that into the equation because you're going to have to pay those anyways. And that's how you can figure out the price that you 100% should not go below. I think you could have a higher min if you want to and should maybe, but at least don't go below that number.
I feel like that's a really good conversation for property managers to have. Because I think there is sometimes this expectation of what something should rent for, and it's sort of just a number that's pulled out. Maybe you your neighbor told you that they rent for this amount. So that's like now stuck in your owner's mind. So I think that's a really like smart and methodical way to approach that.
And could I add one more thing, Becca? Sorry, I'm talking a lot. But with this conversation, when you have this conversation with the hosts, it can be very awkward. And that's like, for example, we've all had that time as a property manager where you get a booking and then you get a phone call immediately from the owner. You're like, oh no, what's going on? And then they call and like, how dare you book it for that cheap? And then you just ask them like, okay, well, like, what is the minimum that you want? And then they'll tell you a number. And then they say, and then you ask them, well, where'd you get that number? And they'll just say, 99% of the time, they'll be like, that's just what it feels like. And I think feelings can be an important factor. Like you definitely don't want to upset your owners, but if you show them the data in PriceLabs and show them this competitor calendar, then hopefully that would be able to get them to change their feelings a little bit. But either way, I think it's important to agree with the owners that you work with as a property manager on a minimum.
I think that's very fair. Now, would you discuss a different minimum for last minute versus something further out, or should it kind of be the same, would you say?
I try to get them to agree on a minimum for the entire year instead of having those conversations come up season by season or even for last minute stuff. If you get their goals right up front, then having them agree to a minimum for the entire year at any point in the year, what the lowest that they will accept. That gives you the flexibility and kind of takes off some of the back and forth that could potentially cause you to miss some opportunities in booking their property.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If you do have to have the conversation where an owner has kind of a ridiculous number in mind, what sort of data are you pulling to maybe convince them otherwise to try something else out and trust you?
For me, you'll see me rely pretty heavily on that competitor calendar and just show them, hey, like this guy's literally right across the street. So are these other ones, and they're not getting booked at that price. And if you rely heavily on that, sometimes they'd be like, oh yeah, but my house is a year newer or something. And it's like, okay, but I don't know. It definitely can be an awkward conversation, but just let the data do the talking. And if they insist on no, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet just to not step on any toes.
Yeah, I think competitors, even sending them directly, like, hey, this is what you're competing against. Look at this property that has 5-star reviews and you're a brand new listing. It's going to take a little bit of time to be able to command a price like that. The future prices in PriceLabs is huge. Letting them know, like visually, this is where your property is booking during low, shoulder, peak season. And this is the opportunity that we have if you give us this much more room to work with a minimum price. And then also I've had many instances where I come to the agreement with the owner where it's like, all right, give me the next 60 days to work with this minimum. And then if you're happy with the results, then we'll keep it. If not, and you still want a higher minimum, then we can agree to that. And that's always a good halfway point to kind of drive your goal as well.
I like that a lot.
And I would add to that, I have a story to share that you can also share with your homeowners. So I had this time, same thing. The owner just wanted a ridiculously high minimum. And to my surprise, he did still get a decent amount of bookings. But what I noticed was these people actually started leaving bad reviews, really bad reviews, because they showed up expecting it to be so much more when it wasn't. So even if you do get bookings at those higher prices, at the higher minimums, might make a little bit more money, but your listing ultimately might suffer too with bad reviews.
Yeah, and I think another good point to extend the conversation is letting them know that you're going to protect high demand periods. There's several settings in PriceLabs that allow you to set a minimum higher than your lowest accepted minimum, specifically by dates. The new feature that basically protects your dates beyond, I think, 180 days, the safety minimum price point, is also a great way to make sure that future dates are well protected from what they booked at in previous years.
Yeah, I think
And there is, sorry, Becca. There is a setting in PriceLabs too, but you do have to ask support to turn it on. I believe, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the last minute minimum price, I think is what it's called. I asked support and they turned it on for me. That's pretty cool because you can set a minimum price that is different, that's lower than your minimum price that you have in the dashboard.
Definitely. Cool. So moving on to sort of understanding the market. Markets have been changing. Y'all have been working in many different markets. I think everybody's sort of heard like things are coming back to the new normal. We're not sort of in that post-COVID boom anymore. In many markets, at least this year, I've seen that booking windows are decreasing. Other markets, I think even last year we saw that they were increasing. So how do you all keep up with what's the right decision for your market and how the market is changing year over year?
Yeah, I think having a pulse on market data, whether you get that from the market dashboards in PriceLabs, whether you can leverage your own market data from internal sources, key data, AirDNA, all platforms that provide some sort of scope on market conditions. I think one other component is supply in the market. Understanding supply in the market really impacts what you can do going forward based on what you've done historically. I think that's huge. And then also, I find great value in some of these like seminars or some of these conferences where they give you kind of a quick look back at the last 3 months and letting you know how that's changed. Because most of the time market data is aggregated across year over year. So some of those more immediate trends get kind of drowned out. But in some of these seminars or conferences where they're giving you a recap of how the last quarter went, that brings some level of proactiveness that you can take on and keep an eye on. But yeah, having some sort of data you can rely on, I think it's going to be huge. Even now, as things have stabilized in most markets, I think a lot of the markets that I was managing have kind of returned a little bit to that 2018, 2019 level. But also the societal economic conditions are quite shifty. So being aware that traveler behavior gets impacted by that as well is something that you have to also keep a pulse on.
No, I completely agree with that. I think, even though people are saying things are returning back to what they were like pre-COVID, the markets are completely different now. The amount of supply that we're seeing in many of the major markets sometimes is like doubled. So you can't expect, even if some of the demand is similar to where it's been in the past, we're kind of in a whole new world here. Matt, what was sort of your take on keeping a pulse on the market trends?
I would say if you really want to keep a pulse on market trends, hire a revenue manager. Well, if you want to learn how to do it yourself, like Omar was saying, there's lots of data that you can dive into on PriceLabs. And another big thing is there's probably tons of Facebook groups that are just for your area. So if you just look up on Facebook, I don't know, Airbnb hosts Detroit or whatever, there's probably already a Facebook group. And there people tend to send not so much data, but more kind of experiences, and you can collaborate there and see how people are doing. And sometimes you can actually ask people, like a revenue manager on those groups, and say, hey, what's the data looking like here? And sometimes they'll just tell you. So that is a hack you can get away with sometimes.
Yeah, another source that I found that as of recently is like bureaus of tourism boards across cities, like tapping into their emails and making sure you're getting their updates, because they are, I mean, their economies sometimes depend on those type of demand. So they are very tuned into how those things have changed. And then also, while not super related, but still correlated, I think hotel trends as well. So hotel demand is going to obviously spill over or have some sort of impact on short-term rentals. So knowing how things are shifting in that sense as well is important.
Oh, definitely. I'd also, just to add to the list of resources, similar to the local bureaus, I'd say like any local advocacy groups that you might have.
Mm.
A lot of the times they work with, companies like PriceLabs or Key Data to bring in data. So if you have an advocacy group in your area, definitely get connected with them for multiple reasons, but data sharing is definitely a part of it. When you're thinking about this data, so okay, we have data from all these sources. What are like the key the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you're looking at when evaluating demand last minute?
For me, it's nights booked versus nights available. I think length of stay searches, if you can get any sort of data on that, those are going to be important to position your portfolio to align. Sometimes even just going on Airbnb and doing a search for several different length of stays to understand the supply on those searches is going to determine how you need to pivot your specific segment of portfolio to align.
And I would say the competitor calendar also kind of shows you the minimum length of stay. So just like Omar was saying,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times I might suggest, rather than decreasing your price for last minute stays, maybe try first increasing the length of stay and see if you can still make the same amount of money, but instead of 1 2-night booking, you just get 2 1-night bookings at the same price.
Yeah, I found myself using, sorry, Becca. I found myself using booking value under the minimum stay settings as a good way to kind of hit those targets as well. PriceLabs will adjust the minimum stay depending on the number of nights available and the booking value that you've set for your target. And that's a good way to kind of optimize your calendar as well.
I like that, Omar. That's a great idea. You just taught me something. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
One of the more like overlooked settings, I would say, but it's one that I used. I actually, in that same type of conversation where I had an owner, they were saying, I don't care what the minimum stay is. I just want to get $1,000 if somebody books a house. So it was very easy to go in and just say, okay, booking value is 1,000. So then in certain seasons, we had a 7-night minimum over the summer just because that's how the market works here. But in certain seasons, they could have like a 2-night minimum if it was a higher demand dates. Other times we'd increase the stay and everybody was happy. Sorry, Matt, were you gonna say something?
Nope.
I think I cut you off. Okay, good. Beautiful. So now let's talk about, well, actually one more question before. We've sort of talked about lowering rates, I think, a decent amount. Is there ever a situation where you all have actually raised rates last minute? Because people will ask us that sometimes.
Yeah, I think compression events are going to be huge for that kind of strategy. Understanding, hey, Taylor Swift just announced a concert in this city, or Lionel Messi's coming to your city and he's playing a game. It's going to be sold out. Understanding the type of demand that comes with such compression events allows you to, raise rates and kind of play a little bit of last minute risk, knowing that there's going to be an elevated demand and occupancy to be reached. I think those are probably the main ones that come to mind when raising rates in last minute situations.
Yeah, and I think you missed one. I think if Case Dice, the accounting guy, comes into town, obviously you're gonna want to go add that premium. But the other time I've added premiums was if you do decrease from 2-night to 1-night minimum. I like to add a premium there just to kind of hopefully make sure people don't have parties there, because you don't want somebody booking like $100 a night to go have a party. So I will increase those because those are a shorter supply anyways. There aren't as many people offering 1-night stays. So it's a lot of times you can get away with premium for those.
Yeah, and then maybe one other point, depending on your market, ski season or ski markets specifically, you get a last minute dump of snow for the upcoming weekend. Huge opportunity to put a premium. People in Big Bear and places that are drive-through specifically, will make that trek, and will be okay paying the higher price as long as they have a stay out there.
That definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So moving on to optimizing your OTA visibility when we're thinking about last minute, we're trying to fill our calendar. I like that you all said that you go in and actually look at supply for different lengths of stay. I think that's a really great strategy. What are some other maybe like settings that might be stopping your listings from appearing maybe higher up in search results for last minute bookings? Do you have any insights to the formulas that the OTAs use?
Yeah, so one that I started leveraging recently was from Airbnb, their strike-through pricing. So that's a good kind of marketing move that the customer sees very directly, saying like, hey, you're getting this much off of your rental total. This price or this house usually goes for this, you're getting it for this much. That has a little bit of an incentive in booking. So I think the rule for Airbnb specifically is they look at the last 60 days and see and calculate your median rate. And if you drop your median rate by more than 10%, they'll show that strike through pricing. So that's something to stay on top of, especially for last minute strategies.
Yeah, and to add on what Omar said, as a property manager, if owners are asking like, hey, why don't you go put in discounts directly in Airbnb, like do that discount feature, you definitely can and do that sometimes, but you could also tell them, hey, if I do a big discount in PriceLabs, it's gonna trigger the same strike through pricing.
Mhm.
So that is something that you can keep in mind. Another thing that might restrict you from getting last minute bookings is there's the feature on Airbnb, so you can have it so it's instant book always, except for last minute, like if it's 24 hours or 48 hours, you can have it request to book. If you turn on request to book, that is going to hurt you in search results because Airbnb just want to makes it simple for people to book. So if you keep it as instant book for last minute stays, that will help you too. Obviously, that's not going to work for everybody, but one thing to keep in mind.
No, I think even without it affecting where you show up in search results, if you're booking within 48 hours, you probably want to confirm where you're staying pretty
Mhm.
quickly versus having to wait to hear from a property manager. So I think both visibility and then also guest behavior, that's a really good tip. Would you say, like, if we're thinking about the OTAs, maybe different ones that you're listing on, when you're dealing with, maybe a studio or like a 1 bedroom or something that's much larger, typically the much larger homes are a lot harder to fill last minute, right? You have a 10-bedroom home. Not everybody wants to, rent that next weekend. A little bit harder to get a whole group together. What are some of the differences in how you approach last minute stays for these maybe smaller units versus larger units, and do you do anything differently on the OTAs to promote those different types?
I think as a general rule of thumb, the bigger the listing, the more people it sleeps, the further in advance that you should try and get bookings. Obviously, there are exceptions. Every market is different. But for example, I've got one in Pennsylvania that's just a huge mansion. It's like 2 to 3 grand a night. I'm already going to put it at the minimum price when it's about a month away, and it's still going to be hard to get bookings. Whereas, a condo or a townhouse here in St. George, Utah, I can put it at the minimum within a week, and it's going to fill up. So the smaller it is, generally, the more transient it will be, and the more people, the more of a substitute that it will be for hotels. And people always expect to be able to book hotels last minute. So if they're looking for hotels for 2 people to sleep, they're going to see, oh, let's check Airbnb as well, and go book there.
Yeah, I think those are huge points. It's always going to be much harder to get a last minute booking for those bigger homes. One of the things that we used to do for bigger homes as they got closer in and we saw calendar nights still available is try to upsell them on an extra night, try to extend their stay, and get a little bit more as opposed to just going unbooked for those dates around those reservations that are coming closer in. There's a bit more of expendable income for those reservations typically, and even 50% discount is going to give it a big boost to your revenue goals, as opposed to having it unbooked.
And Becca asked about OTAs. I have maybe it's not specifically for OTA, but there is a software called Bestie AI. And what you can program that to do is to automatically message guests to send messages whenever there's an adjacent night open, whether before their stay or after. And you can have it like program it to say, hey, we have a night after you available. We're going to give you a 10% discount or whatever percent you choose to get that booked. That has been really cool for me too.
Is that Bestie, Bestie?
Besty, I think, AI. Yeah.
Yep. So cool. Somebody had asked that in the question. So very cool, very cool. Now, so we talked a little bit about strike through pricing. Are you all mostly listed on Airbnb or maybe Vrbo? Do you have any insights? Booking.com. I know we have some international folks listening in, and Booking.com is pretty big in Europe and the rest of the world. How you're managing your rates on the different OTAs? Does that sort of change depending on which channel you're on? How do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I think for my experience across the different channels, from a host or a manager's perspective, the commissions are going to be lower typically on Airbnb, VRBO, and a bit higher on Booking and Expedia. Part of that is they have these member discounts that they offer to part of their client base. That's usually around 10%. So you kind of tag that on to the commission that's being taken out of that reservation. And it ends up being a much lower ADR that comes back to your PMS versus Airbnb and VRBO or even direct. So we try to kind of counter the last minute stuff to be more direct or Airbnb, VRBO, to kind of avoid really that the really high drop in ADR that you would see across Booking and Expedia. But those are also great channels. We get a lot of last minute activity for more of our boutique hotel type of products. So you just have to understand what kind of traveler is going to be booking through what channel and what type of traveler is going to be booking for your specific property. So those are all things to keep in mind there.
Yeah, I usually, same as Omar, I kind of recommend Airbnb is obviously going to be at least in the United States, that's going to be the biggest one for most people. And there's a kind of Airbnb guru guy. His name is James Svedek. Actually, I think he's Canadian. He recommends to get really, really good at Airbnb first and then worry about listing other places. Kind of like reinvesting everything into what you know is working. And then once you have Airbnb down, you're really good at it. Then at that point, maybe kind of start doing on VRBO, booking.com. Whereas if you kind of are doing like a spray approach where just throw your listing out everywhere, it's going to be hard to keep track of all of that. And even setting up the tech is going to be pretty hard. So even if you only listed on Airbnb your whole life, I mean, maybe you would obviously miss some bookings, but you would, in my opinion, you would still be pretty good off.
Yeah, I think leveraging cancellation policies differently across different channels for your intended goal is also a good way to achieve kind of your distribution of reservations for the channels that you're hoping to get those on.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. When we're thinking about, so we talked about the OTAs, let's talk a little bit about maybe our direct bookings. I like to think of like revenue management as like an ecosystem that multiple departments within your company can sort of operate within. So your revenue managers should ideally be working closely or at least sharing information with, say, your marketing team. What are some things or strategies that you've seen be successful for last minute bookings, direct either through your website or however you might get them?
Yeah, if you have a list of repeat customers, I think that's a big one to leverage and just stay front of mind. Even if you're not trying to get those last minute, sending a regular cadence of like, hey, featured properties, or hey, you've stayed here before at this time, that it's coming up if you'd like to book it again this year. I think those are good ways to just boost the conversion on your direct side for sure.
Yeah, I would say, I guess it depends on how big your company is. Like if you're kind of a mom and pop property management, you're probably kind of active on Facebook, hopefully. If you're like a really, really big company, you can do like paid ads and all that stuff. But if you're a smaller company, what I've seen work really well is if you're just active on Facebook and Instagram and always posting those last minute discounts, you're kind of, that's what's going to ultimately build a following. And posting how great your properties are and doing reels and all that stuff. That's what properties that I have, or property managers that I've worked with do. And they've seen pretty good success with it. I wouldn't be good at that because I'm not very good at social media, but it is a free way to try and get last minute bookings.
I think so one of my team members, Monique, she has a short-term rental in Vermont. It's the Vermont A-frame. So if you ever want to follow her on Instagram, she does a really incredible job. She like posts like that, especially during like their fall leaf season. She'll post exactly, hey, we've got this weekend and this weekend open. It's she does it in a very like pretty and aesthetic way, and it works really, really well for her. So little shout out to Monique on that one. So we have about 10 minutes left. This has gone by really fast. Y'all, thank you so much for all of your insights. I do want to turn it over to the listeners to see if there are any questions that are top of mind for them, either about anything that we've discussed thus far, or any advice that they might need. We do have a couple questions that have just been coming through that we've saved. So the first is from Cody here in Charleston, South Carolina. Hello, Cody. So how do you calculate wear and tear on the overall property when looking at reducing rates to keep occupancy well above average? So how do you think about wear and tear as one of those costs, especially if we're thinking last minute short bookings? Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind. I think if you have the capacity, you should already be scheduling some regular maintenance to your property. Part of it is being an investment and having to put back into it, especially as supply continues to grow. You have more competitors, you have a need to stand out a bit more. And knowing when those periods of regular maintenance are going to be coming up kind of allows you to understand whether it's worth it to take a last minute, or whether you're okay kind of winding down for a slower period and waiting for that maintenance to kind of revamp and then go after a bit more aggressive, higher ADR after that.
Yeah, and I'd say wear and tear in general can be like, there might be a way to figure it out. Like if you look at your last 12 months and say, hey, what were my wear and tear expenses? Like how many sheets did guests ruin, or how many, et cetera, and then just divide it and figure out that average. And if you did want to do that, I would suggest maybe adding that to the variable costs that I was talking about earlier when finding out your absolute minimum that you should not go below.
That definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense. We do have a question from Javier. Matt, what was the name of the Airbnb expert? James? Something?
James Svetec, Svetec, I think.
Okay, cool. That was an easy one. And then this is more as like a consultant question. So how do you all sort of manage all of your clients' listings? So maybe give us an idea of like what like your portfolio looks like of the number of clients that you're working with, number of listings. And then this is more of like a technical question. Do you have the clients cover a software like a PMS or a PriceLabs themselves, or is it something that is included with your services?
From our end, we probably work with around 15 to 20 clients across maybe around 500 listings at the moment. And typically we just have access to their PriceLab. So most of them are going to be on PriceLab that we get paired up with. There's a couple wheelhouse that we also have access to. And in some instances, we're just providing kind of some guidance and auditing of their current structure, whether it's not with in-house tool or something like that. But yeah, it just kind of varies. But typically, the partner or customer already is operating with some sort of revenue management software or tool, and we either take that on or kind of work to help them optimize that.
Yeah, for pricingpro.co, it depends. Like some people don't want to ever look at PriceLabs, even though it's not that hard. Like it's pretty user friendly. Some people still prefer just to have a revenue manager. In that case, we'll just put it on our own PriceLabs account. If you have tons of listings and you want to still have access to it, we'll use your own. It's kind of case by case basis. So if you did want to see what we would do for you, feel free to reach out.
And then at what point would you all say, do customers come to consultants looking for a revenue manager? I think we've actually had a couple of people that asked about revenue managers or revenue manager consultants. At what point do you think it makes sense for somebody to hire one of you all, or even maybe bring somebody in-house?
For us at Purple Pricing, I think, I mean, we've worked with clients anywhere where they're just a handful of listings, and they just recognize that that revenue management component is really what's preventing them from further growth or from getting to their goals. Or some instances where maybe you're a big enough company, but you don't have the budget for a revenue manager, and maybe something in between would be a better fit for your current structure. So we're pretty flexible with our approach. But if you recognize that there is a need there for revenue management, we're happy to build a customized approach and strategy for you as well. So yeah, shout out Purple Pricing there.
No doubt. So I would say, I mean, as Pricing Pro, we kind of tend to focus more on property managers. So maybe Omar might know a little bit more about like working with actual owners than we do. But as far as property managers go, usually what I recommend is it's probably good for you to at least learn how to do pricing for the first couple listings. So usually if somebody with only a couple listings, they're a property manager, if they reach out to me, I'll just say, hey, let me just teach you how to do it, and you can just do it until you don't have time to do it. Maybe once you get up to like 4, 5, 6 listings, to me, that's when I found that property managers kind of are starting to be spending a lot of time in PriceLabs optimizing it. So usually I mean, it depends on how big the listings are. When people get to around 5, 7 listings, somewhere around there, to me, that's when it seems like they're starting to reach out to revenue managers and wanting to offsource some of the heavy lifting.
From like a larger operator's like perspective, so like the company that I worked for here in Charleston, we did not have a revenue manager. We had a little over 100 listings. It was sort of something that the property managers, the directors sort of worked together on. And I actually see that a lot in the market still, where there are companies that have been operating for a long time. They do the revenue management motions, but they don't necessarily call it revenue management or have somebody specifically looking after it. I will say, if you do want to bring it in-house, there aren't always a ton of vacation rental revenue managers just in the market. It's not really a developed field like you see for hotel revenue management, where you can go to college and get a degree specifically for that. You know, I've seen a lot of people pull from the hotel industry. I've seen but also just a lot of talent sort of developed within. So if you have somebody who's like guest services, but like likes spreadsheets, they could be your revenue manager in the next couple of years. Hopefully, you know, there's a lot of resources, like we were saying, whether it's the different conferences, like DARM is a great conference to go to. You know, there's a bunch of them throughout the year. Also just industry associations. So I'm actually on the board of RevProf, which is a new nonprofit that is specifically to make a community of revenue managers for our space. So there's a lot of resources that, even though they're not like specific college courses that you can take, there's a lot of things that you can do to sort of build that knowledge yourself or for somebody else in your company. But if you don't have time, of course, our lovely revenue management consultants are also a really great resource.
Yeah, we've had partnerships where we will take over the revenue management function and then help in hiring a revenue manager, whether that be someone external or someone in-house that, like you said, maybe has an interest in learning that kind of thing. And then having some sort of training guidance period, and then really doing the handoff where they can confidently take over that component and aspect of the role. So that's another offering that we have as well.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that y'all did that. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. Sorry, we have like 1 minute left. Let me see. Got 2 more questions. We can sort of speed. Well, I'll leave the how much is it to hire you question. You guys can reach out to them directly.
Yeah.
We don't need to discuss that here. But our final question will be, can a good revenue manager I would say, could a good revenue manager really pick up in any market or country if they aren't necessarily used to that market? How do they sort of, how would you approach a new market? And is it like scary for you, or is it like, I've got this because I know other markets?
Yeah, I think a good revenue manager knows what to look out for. And the neighborhood data and PriceLabs, again, is clutch for picking up on trends in new markets, getting a grasp of the trends. And then also, when a revenue manager takes over, they should be in contact with the local people there, whether that be the property management themselves or operations of some sort, to kind of fill the gaps of where that knowledge may be missing, to really have a full grasp of market dynamics and trends and what travelers, where they're coming from, who to target, that kind of stuff. That's a lot of local knowledge, and I think a good revenue manager should be able to pick up on a new market pretty quickly.
Yeah, same thing as Omar. I mean, we're doing market research all day, every day, and adding another market is just doing the same thing that we do all day, every day. So
Yeah,
it's not hard. It's actually kind of an exciting new thing. It's like, okay, now I get to go learn about a whole new market.
absolutely.
And I feel like in the same way that owners feel like their homes are like unique, special snowflakes that are unlike any other home in the market, markets are kind of like that too. They're, you have general trends that will be similar. If you're in a ski market, there are certain things that you look out for. The drivers, there's going to be similar drivers for different types of markets. So there are very few very specifically unique markets. So if you're hiring a revenue manager, they probably have experience in something similar, even if it's not the specific one that you're currently in. But cool. We're at the hour. This has been so much fun. Omar, Matt, thank you so much. If y'all have any questions at all, you can reach out to any of us. I think that we dropped Omar and Matt's LinkedIn's, so feel free to follow them. Again, hopefully you all subscribe to RevLab so you can continue to get some great content like this. Matt, Omar, any final words?
Just thank you so much for hosting us, Becca. It's been great getting to chat with Matt and yourself.
I would say if you guys have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me or Omar. Our website is pricingpro.co. You can fill out the form there and we can do a free evaluation for you. I don't know, Omar, is it purplepricing.io for you?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And we can include some of that in our follow-up email, which all of you will be receiving. So y'all, thank you so much again. And until next time, have a good one.